back in time.
Wine cooler.
One special I want to look good for.
The delicious frosted side makes the rich kid in me open wide.
How'd you know she smoked?
Your world is ever threatening. Away we go.
This is my son. You want to bet?
God hate me.
Never let him see you sweat.
What do you think when you're on the subway on your own? Speak down to someone you've never met and they ask you for $5. Who is it?
The subway shooter. That man is identified as
And you cannot understand because
the governor said he shot them because they were trying to rob him.
Have you been beaten into the ground?
Yo, how you doing?
Fine.
Give me $5.
What did you say?
Give me $5.
I'll give you $5. You seem to be doing okay. Here's another. This is the story of the subway vigilante.
It was an act of retribution in a city where muggings on the streets and in the subways are daily realities.
Yes, it was December 23rd, 1984 when the shootings took place on a moving subway train in Lower Manhattan. We have to remember that New York in the 80s was a different place than it is today. For instance, in 1980 there were 1,821 homicides compared with 386 last year in 2023.
4 men, 3 wielding sharpened screwdrivers, approached a lone man on a subway train demanding his money.
A slight correction is needed on the news reports of the day. The subway vigilante himself did not recall seeing any screwdrivers. Those 4 assailants never got a chance to take those screwdrivers out of their pockets because the subway vigilante had already gunned them all down.
A 13-state alert went out for a tall blonde suspect, but a large segment of the New York City public roundly applauded the gunman's actions.
This is what makes these vigilante cases so interesting. For some people, pulling out the gun is enough. He pulls out the gun, they're gonna run. For other people, it's like maybe he did have to shoot one. He shoots one, then of course the rest are running. The reality of the situation is the subway vigilante pulled out his gun. He kept shooting until the gun was empty. In fact, in the interrogation, which you will see shortly, he said if he had more bullets, he would have used them. He admitted, he snapped. But my question to you is, what is a good response when you know you're going to be mugged? Some people might say, yeah, maybe he wasn't going to get mugged. The subway vigilante said when he looked at them in their eyes, he knew he was going to be mugged. He also admitted he snapped. But why did he snap? Well, for that we need to go back to 1981, where he was mugged for the first time. And these muggers successfully took off his jacket. But that wasn't enough. Oh no, they had to beat him. They beat him quite badly, leaving him with a bad knee and respiratory issues. And that was the seed for 1984. Because in 81, when that happened, in his own words, he said, that was the day. From that day forth, I always carried a gun.
From eyewitness accounts, police made this composite sketch. No suspects as yet.
And the feeling on the street at the time is quite interesting. From all ages and all races, they were like, yeah, good on him. That's how sick people were of crime in New York at the time. As far as people on the street were concerned, which you'll see in a minute, they were like, good, I hope they let him go.
On board the number 2 IRT train on this Christmas Day, the same train where the vigilante did his thing, the reaction was strongly in favor of taking the law into your own hands. How do New Yorkers feel about fighting back, especially down here in the subways? You think it's okay to carry a knife or gun to defend yourself?
Yes,
And
yes.
will you?
Yeah, if I have to, I will.
Oh, every day is D-Day down here. Yeah, every day.
You know, it's like the Wild Wild West.
I got mugged just 2 weeks ago myself. A guy put a gun to my head. If I had one, I would have used it.
He had a gun put to his head?
It is a time in this city when fighting back makes headlines, when the word vigilante is synonymous to some with a brand of heroism.
Anybody who these little hoodlums try to accost, if they have any means to protect themselves, they should.
Police have circulated a sketch of the gunman and have established a telephone line for tips. But more than 1,500 people have called in to express support for the shooter.
I was mugged once on the subway, and I just perceive, let the guy go. I think it's great.
Could the vigilante actually be an off-duty New York City policeman? That's what the brother of one of the victims thinks.
Come on, you gotta be a marksman or something. Only police officers or mafia can shoot like that.
In one sense, it makes no difference who the vigilante is. What really is significant is that thousands of New Yorkers are so fed up with punks and crime that they think the shootings are great.
He was right.
He was right.
He was right.
To do the shooting.
Yeah.
A vigilante showing up every now and then will have a good, healthy reminder to some of the lawbreakers.
There's no evidence for that. However, it does resonate with us because when we hear the story of somebody getting mugged and they pull out the gun and they shoot everybody, tribal thing within us. You mess with me?
If you were on the jury, how would you find him, innocent or guilty?
Innocent. Lean toward not guilty.
Probably not guilty.
If the jury was the entire population of the city of New York, there's a reasonably good chance the suspect would go free. But will the law, should the law, be in step with what the people think?
If it was me, I would have killed the guy.
Whoa, was that a Freudian slip?
I mean, if it was me and I had to defend myself, I would have done exactly the same thing.
Oh, okay.
A human is going to be a human, no matter what you are, black or white. You're going to defend what's yours. And they was after him, so naturally, he's going to react first. Chances are, if he wouldn't have shot them, they would have did something to him first. I mean, it's self-preservation.
Yes, there you have it. The feeling on the street at the time. People sick of crime.
Mary Allen is the mother of one of the victims of the shooting. She told us she's happy Goetz turned himself in, that there's another side of the story to be discovered.
This man, maybe he's just somebody who's minding his own business, and maybe he's just fed up with the overall situation, and maybe he just clicks one day, and maybe he just does something, I would say to him that I'm sorry about the state of our society.
Before we get into the interrogations, one of the other interesting facts about this case is it was the inspiration for this. And possibly inspired by this. So without further ado, roll it!
He turned himself in at Concord Police Headquarters.
So yes, Bernard Goetz. So there's a good look at him, folks. Similar to what he was wearing on the night and to a gang of four, this looks like an easy target, let's be honest. Skinny, wearing glasses, nerdy, looks like a person who could be successful, might have some money, not going to put up much of a fight. Little did they know. So yeah, he handed himself in. If you were the subway vigilante, would you have handed yourself in? Some people would say if he didn't hand himself in, he would have gotten away with it. He looked nothing like the composite sketch whatsoever. Huh? That ain't Bernard Goetz. It must be crushing to be looking at the news every day and the papers and this subway vigilante is on the loose and you are him, and just the mental torture of, be just easier to turn yourself in and face the music. Or maybe he turned himself in because he came to the realization that a good cross-section of the public were behind him, were on his side, because they too were sick of crime. I wonder which one it was. That's one we don't really get to the bottom of.
This is the home of the man who police say has admitted to the subway shootings. Neighbors and workers were shocked and surprised that one of their own could be the vigilante.
What the interrogators want to know is why and what and how it happened. From all of these interrogations that I watch, this is one of the rare instances where you will find someone being 100% honest. In fact, Bernard Goetz is so honest that if a lawyer was present, he would just tell him to shut the fuck up. And it's a pity that the audio isn't great on it. I have cleaned it up as best as I can. You want to hear him speak? I hear what you're saying. You want to hear him speak, and you're dead right. I've kept it from you long enough. So just to give you the rundown as to what is happening in the room, that is Susan Braver, and that gentleman on the left is Dan Hagendorf. Of course, in the middle is Bernard Goetz, the subway vigilante himself, and on the right is Detective Michael Clark. It seems that Dan and Michael are talking to Bernard Goetz, and he's opening up to them. And then Susan Braver arrives in on a power trip. She cancelled the skiing trip that she was on. Of course she did, because they have the subway vigilante. The infamous subway vigilante has been caught. She's cancelling everything. She wants to be there. And her approach is so off, it looks like he's going to just not talk. And that would have been a disaster. Luckily enough, Dan and Michael start to bring him back around. But you will see the tension is in the air. You know, Bernard Goetz despises these people. These are the people that when he got mugged the first time in 1981, they did nothing for him as far as he was concerned. They let the people go, he didn't get any justice, and that's the reason he always carried a gun. So now I'm going to cut straight to the part where Bernard Goetz tells us about what happened on that fateful night.
I was going downtown to have a drink before Christmas with a few friends and just do some bullshitting for a while. I was in the middle of a project. I got disgusted with it. I was working on a piece of equipment. I said, well, I better take a break. I went downtown. I got on the train. The reason I got on that car, I was going to get in another car. The reason I got in that car was relatively empty. There were plenty of seats available. Now, I didn't realize until 2 days after this happened why that car was relatively empty. These guys had emptied out the car. You know, people aren't that dumb in New York. When there are guys like this around, the car has a tendency to get empty, and the people are right. I walked in that car because I thought there was a seat, and I sat down. And I'm a lot calmer now. This is the third time I've told this, and I'm a lot calmer now than I was when I was the first time. The fellow, one of the fellows who was lying down, he said, there were four fellows in here. He lied down, and he was lying down, and he looked at me and he said, how are you doing? Now legally that's a nothing statement, and this is an everyday statement, and that meant nothing to me. But things started clicking in my, things started clicking in my mind. Now I was the only person in that section of the car with those four. They were all either in front of me or on my right-hand side.
Point is, how do you interpret how we are doing?
I interpreted that as nothing. That was just like, it wasn't even a warning signal. It was just because my response to that was, I was looking down. I know it's impolite to look at people sometimes. So I was looking down. I looked down and I said, fine.
Okay. Now, you interpreted that then. What was your feeling when it said, how are you doing? What were you thinking at that time? What was your impression of how are you doing? What were you feeling?
These were just kids kidding around. Okay. That's all. Could have been just kids kidding around, but it's just a possible warning. Just a possible. It wasn't even a possible warning. I wasn't primed. But then two of them stood up. Okay. And they walked over to my left. Okay? Now there were two on my right and two on my left. The fellow on my right, one of them, at one time he had his hand in his pocket with his bulge saying, I'd seen that before and I know it's bullshit. And I'm going to repeat it again. The reason I know it's bullshit, these guys are too smart to carry guns. You've told them they can't carry guns. Okay? And I knew it was just a bullshit threat. And even if he is carrying a gun, I knew it was bullshit. It's irrelevant. Okay?
So you knew he had no weapon.
As far, in my mind, that was irrelevant, and you can judge me on that. If that's one of your technicalities, I could claim that bothered me, and that didn't bother me.
So this is what I mean when I say Bernard Goetz was 100% open, because if anyone was trying to claim that they felt their life was in danger, they would say, yeah, that bulge in that guy's pocket as he approached me, I thought he had a gun. That's the reason I shot everybody. But there he is, mentioning that he didn't even think that they had any weapons at all. He thought that the guy was faking it, but he still shot them. So this is what I mean about him being honest. It did turn out that screwdrivers were found on the guys. Now, they did claim that they were using those screwdrivers to break into arcade later, but of course they could have been easily used to mug Bernard Goetz.
You see, I don't care if I live or die, and whether you believe that should be on some of the statements after my mugging when I tried to get my pistol permit. I told them I don't have a family or anything. If someone kills, I'm not going to. If someone kills, I don't care. But I just don't want to be maimed. I don't want to be beaten again. Now, I'm sorry for speaking to you in this tone, but you see, to me, you represent the system in New York.
Okay, he has something.
Okay, no, that was nothing. That was nothing. Well, no. What happens next? Saying, "How are you doing?" That's not a threat to me in my mind. The bulge in my pocket, in his pocket. That's not a threat to me.
Okay.
The situation when the two move on my left and the two are on my right, now that is a real fucking threat. And if you don't recognize that, okay, that is a real threat. Now at that point,
Are they all moving?
I don't know. The important thing is to keep track of their position. You see, you're not familiar with fighting and violence. It is serious. You think of violence. I told one of the men in there, people think of fighting. You watch Star Trek and you see Captain Kirk fight a bunch of guys, and 3 minutes later he's walking arm in arm with a beautiful woman. That is bullshit. That is so far from reality. The real threat at that point, when the two are on my right and the two are on my left, I knew at that point I would have to pull the gun. I'm going to say this. At that time, I was going to pull the gun, but I wasn't going to kill him. And that is what I wound up trying to do. But I had no intention of killing him at that time. Listen. What my intention was at that time was just to follow the situation as closely as I could. And it's important in a situation like this. I'm trying to explain what goes on in your mind and how to handle a situation like this. You have to be afraid. There's nothing wrong with being afraid. People are afraid. It's a natural human response. It's probably a result of tens of thousands of years of evolution. Because when you're afraid, you think a lot. And you can't let the fear overtake you, but you have to think of all the possibilities. Okay? And you think as much as you can.
I don't care if I live or die. A person on the edge like that is so dangerous. Trauma. He never really recovered from the first mugging in 1981. He was damn sure it wasn't going to happen to him again. He was a ticking time bomb from that moment on. And these four guys were unfortunate to be the ones that were present when the bomb went off. 19-year-olds Barry Allen, Troy Canty, and Darrell Cabey, and 18-year-old James Ramseur.
The one on my left, he asked me. He didn't ask, but according to the papers, he asked me. His exact words were, "Give me $5." He said it with a smile, and his eyes were bright. The words meant bullshit. I knew I had to pull the gun, but it was the look. Now, you cannot understand this. It was his eyes were shiny. He had a smile on his face. He claimed it was all a joke. If you believe that, I accept that. When I saw the smile on his face and the shine in his eyes, that he was enjoying this, I knew what they were going to do.
Don't you find it interesting that Bernard Goetz honestly believes he knew what they were going to do? Just by the look in his eye, he knew what they were going to do. He obviously suffers from some form of PTSD from the attack in 81, and his mind is running into overdrive as to the possible outcomes, so he took the situation into his own hands. No, Bernard, we don't know what they were going to do. We only know what you did.
Do you understand? Okay? Do you understand now? It was at that point. Now, for combat, you have to be cold-blooded. And I was. It was at that point I decided I was going to kill them all, murder them all, do anything.
What did you think they were going to do?
How can you ask a question like that? They were going to have fun with me, yes.
What do you mean by that?
What do you mean?
What is your interpretation of that? I can't get inside your head.
Beat the shit out of you.
You thought they were going to beat you up?
You just use a casual phrase. What are you saying? Miss, your attitude, you are so far removed from the reality, and yet they send you here as a professional to investigate this. It's beyond belief.
Don't you find the dynamics of this interrogation really interesting? It's Bernard Goetz who is in control. Bernard Goetz is the one who's calling the shots in this interview. Look at the way he's pointing the finger. It's like a CEO of a corporation giving out to his employees.
If you can't understand what was in my mind at that time and what was in their minds, fine. Then you just watch this tape again or whatever you want to do, and you think, okay?
You understand, but what we want to do is to hear it from you. We understand.
Look, what they were going to do is enjoy me for a while. They were going to beat the fucking shit out of me. Okay? The money and this and that is all bullshit. Now listen, he asked me once. This is why I use the word ask. Give me $5. Now, is that asking, as the papers say asking? Is that asking or is that telling me?
There's a big difference between do you have $5, may I have $5, and give me $5. Little did the guys know what was going on in Bernard Goetz's head at the time. When you make demands from complete strangers in the middle of the night on a subway train, that in and of itself is dangerous. Obviously, the guys didn't know how dangerous. Maybe you've done it 20 times before and nothing's happened. It might be 1 in 20 where things don't go well, but when they don't go well, they might go really, really badly, as they did in this situation. Whether or not they were going to beat Bernard Goetz up, there's no way that we would know that. But in Bernard Goetz's mind, that's what they were going to do, and that's all that matters, because at the end of the day, he was the one with the gun. He was the one who was going to have the last say.
You know, just to say that, to say, give me $5. Before I started shooting, I wanted verification. And I was very deceitful. I asked him quietly, I said, what did you say? And he said, give me $5. I said, and I didn't say, as the paper said, I'll give each of you $5. I said, I'll give you $5. Now, let me explain one thing. To do something like this, how cold-blooded it is, and you can sit in your ivory towers and condemn it and say, oh, this person is a monster. You lay out your pattern of fire. The pattern of fire has to be from left to right, and in terms of details, and in terms of responsibility, you can accuse me of a lot of things, okay? Because I know, in my heart, what I was. What they didn't die, well, that's God, what God has wanted, evidently, if there is a God. But I, in my heart, was a murderer. Everything, speed is everything. You just think of speed and the count. He gave me verification when he said, give me $5. I pulled out the piece. I just started firing. As I told the fellow in there, it's unimportant to look at what you're firing at. You just target images in your mind. To use his expression, you aim for the center of the mass. You run, you keep moving. All you have to do is to be faster than they are. Now perhaps you don't know what's happening on your right-hand side, but it doesn't matter. You do what you have to do as quickly as possible. You don't think. You live from the fraction of a moment to a fraction of a moment. You just react. You just react. You forget everything that happened the instant before.
It's so interesting listening to Bernard Goetz talk about laying out the path of fire from left to right. All you got to do is be faster than they are. It's all about reflex. You just work on reflex. It sounds like he's been waiting for this moment his whole life. It's been building up to this point. The way he's talking a bit fanatical. When he snapped, he really snapped. And what an interesting clash of these two worlds. If you surround somebody and you demand $5 off them, not once but twice, the chances are there's going to be a reaction and maybe it's not going to be good. Of course, this is an overreaction, but at the same time, it is dangerous to be demanding money off somebody.
Psych, you target. That was number one. I got number one. Got number two. They say I shot him in the back. It doesn't matter. I wasn't aiming for the back, this and that. You aim
show
for the
me
center.
where you were, show me where they were.
Look, this is a detail afterwards. This is, we'll go into this afterwards.
Okay.
When I was surrounded, at that point, pulling the gun would have been enough. But when I saw this one fellow, when I saw the gleam in his eye and the smile on his face, and they say it's a joke, good, let them say it's a joke. Anything they say. What?
Is he the one that asked for the money?
Look, I don't care about the technicality. Asking for the money is bullshit. The guy, his exact words were, give me $5. That's bullshit. The robbery has nothing to do with it. When I saw his smile and the look in his eye, and you cannot understand, because how can people like you be familiar with violence? You're not familiar. Have you been beaten into the ground?
I've been afraid on the subway, I'll tell you.
Okay, but you've been afraid.
I've not been a victim.
Okay, but when you find out, I told them in there, okay, I'm going to tell it to you again. I'll say to you again. You take what the city does. If your person is a skull, that is you. And if their brain is, let's say, a glass globe inside that skull, what happens with violence is the city tells these people the rules are you cannot carry a gun and you cannot kill a person, but you can do anything else. And you terrorize the public. The public has to carry guns in New York, and a lot of people carry guns. People are afraid to admit it because you threaten the public. You add to the problem. You threaten people with a 1-year mandatory sentence. And I don't care if I get or not, you got enough here to lock me up for a good long time. Good. But now, let me finish. Look. Excuse me. If you have a skull with a glass globe in the center, people can come up to that skull and they can break the teeth and break the jaw and whatever. Great. And what the city will do, they'll help you wire up the jaw together and put the teeth in and patch up, and the glass globe inside is shattered still. And on the outside, everything is fine. And so long as things on the surface have been patched up, the city says, fine, everything is okay. And it's not like that.
That's an interesting analogy, that glass globe analogy. I wonder, is that a Bernard Goetz original? He's after explaining the workings of his own mind. They came along, they beated him up, everything was all twisted and broken, they patched it back together. The glass globe looked perfect on the outside, but inside it was not perfect. First mugging in 81 led to this moment in 84. Been waiting for this moment, maybe unbeknownst to himself. The synchronicities all led to that moment. In 81, that was it. He never truly recovered from that.
Mr. Goetz, why these four? Why these four?
Oh, isn't that beautiful? You asked the question in an intellectual way. Why these four?
Why these four?
I didn't pick out these four. I never met those guys. I told you have it in here. I never met them.
Why these four, though? I mean,
because I saw what they were intending to do with me, miss. Miss, they were intending to play with me, like a cat plays with a mouse. Now, you're not familiar with these things because you're not familiar with violence. They shouldn't have sent you up here. They should have sent people. They should have sent people. I'm sure there are people in the New York City government who are familiar with violence, who know violence. Okay? Because it's a realm of reality that you are not familiar with. And so you speak of these things in an intellectual value. in an intellectual way, and I am going to be judged on, this was not displayed, or that was not displayed, or how could you possibly have known what would have happened? I mean, it's the way how I look at the bureaucracy of New York, it makes me sick.
Wow, Susan rubs Benny up the wrong way, and that's for sure. Why these four? It sounds to me like what she wants to say is, would you have shot them if they were white? Or was it because they were black? Is that why you shot them? Indicating that race baiting type of a thing. And interestingly enough, maybe she's right. We don't know. We can't know. It's a hypothetical thing. 4 people surrounded Bernard Goetz in the fragile state he was, considering what happened to him in 1981. If he thought that he was going to get beaten up and mugged, it wouldn't matter if you were pink or blue or any color, he was going to shoot. With his previous glass globe skull analogy, he was broken on the inside. He had a gun. It was fully loaded. You want to do this to me? I'm going to get you first. However, Maya Friedman, Bernard Goetz's neighbor, proclaims that she heard him say the following: the only way we're going to clean up these streets is by getting rid of all the inject the N-word and other things there. When confronted about this at a case, he actually admitted it. So there is that in Bernard Goetz.
But it taught me several things. It taught me that there are vicious people out there. It taught me that anything can happen. Now, you don't know violence like I do. The worst thing about violence, it's not knowing what will happen next. And there's no way that you can understand that unless if you've been in the same position. I was attacked then. I was attacked the next day. I was carrying a gun. That was it. Okay, now
you got a gun immediately after that?
Yes.
So that was Bernard Goetz briefly recounting what happened to him in 81. Now he goes back to the subway attack.
There were 2 fellows. One of them was actually pretending he wasn't with the other guys. He changed his thing, and I think he held his hand up, he held a strap or something like that. And he just pretended, he didn't even look at me like he wasn't aware of what was going on. I'd like to say something. When these 4 guys approached me, one of the passengers in the car that I could glimpse, they turned their head away in the other direction. They knew that was going to happen. They were smart. If I wasn't carrying a gun, nobody would have helped me. And they would have been smart, because if someone had helped me, they could have wound up being fucked up beyond belief. But it doesn't matter. That's all academic.
That's an interesting point made by Bernard Goetz here. He's actually talking about the bystander effect. To be honest, you could do a whole video on that in and of itself. Hypothetical situation of Bernard Goetz getting robbed, and as he says, he was convinced that they were going to not only rob him, but they were going to beat him up, have fun with him like a cat with a mouse. Would someone intervene in that scenario? It's going to take a brave person in a situation like that to actually intervene. The bystander effect was a study that was done after the 1964 essay and murder of Kitty Genovese, where the New York Times did an article on it claiming that 38 people witnessed it and neither intervened nor did they call the authorities. The only problem with that article was it was full of inconsistencies. And the first thing that goes through people's heads that they found out with this study is that, someone else is going to take care of it, someone else who is more qualified. Other variables that go into play are their own safety. Is this going to get me in trouble? And that's what Bernard Goetz is talking about here. And he's right. I mean, if something had kicked off in the subway, he's getting beaten up. People are going to be very nervous to intervene if they think they will be next. However, it's not unheard of, but it does depend on the numbers. If one person intervenes, another person is more likely to help and another person is more likely to help. But are there going to be enough people there to help? And I think Bernard Goetz is probably right in this one, because the subway wasn't that full of people. The amount of men and women that were there, the chances of there being enough there to overpower 4 guys are slim.
The fellow, one of the fellows, it looked like he was trying, I don't know if he was facing from the front or from the back or whatever, it seemed as if he was trying to get to the steel wall of the subway car, but he couldn't. Now, I let him have it. I let one of the other guys have it. The guy who was pretending he wasn't with him. I ran up to the first two to check them, who were on the ground, the first two that I had shot. And they were taken care of. It's all very cold-blooded, and this is going to offend everyone. I went back to the other two to check on them, and I looked at him. And he can't verify this because he was probably out of it by then. If I had shot him or if he wasn't, I don't know. And I said, you seem to be doing all right. Here's another. I was going to shoot him. He jerked his arm, and I just, trigger pulls on reflex. You just work, the secret is you work on reflex. You just work on reflex. And I was out of ammunition, because that was number 5. So I was going to go to the first guy again, the guy who did the talking. And I was just aware of the keys in my left-hand pocket. And I came up to him, and I saw his eyes twitching, and I saw the fear in his eyes, and then you just suddenly, things started dissipating. I said nothing. I asked her again, Miss, are you okay? And she said, I'm okay, but I'm not sure about these two here. I said, don't worry about them, they're assholes. And at one time I said to the guy who talked to me, I don't remember exactly what I said to him, I spoke to him in anger again. I said, you better learn a lesson from all this, or something to that effect. And at that point, the conductor came in the car. I wasn't even aware of the other people, but I guess, you see, when this is going on, you don't, like, you hear concussions. You know exactly, in a sense, you know more what you're doing than you've ever known before. You hear concussions, but you don't, the only sense that you need is your eyes. Your vision changes, you have a wide field of view, you see everything. Your memory is changed. It was changing because you're not thinking at an upper level, you're reacting. You become like a reptile, And I say, all you need is speed and reaction. It's so weird to go through this. It's like, you don't know that this is in there. And in your mind, when I say in there, you don't know this is in your mind. The conductor came in the car, and he kind of barged in, and he said, like, what's going on here? He was indignant, and he just seemed like a good man. So I said, no, I'm not good at describing things. I'm not a talker. And so I said, I never said they tried to rip me off. I said they tried to rob me, and I shot them. And that was it.
Bernard Goetz was sentenced to 1 year in prison, and he was fined $5,000. Some people would say it's a slap on the back of the wrist. What are your thoughts on that sentence? And what are your thoughts on the other cases that we would love to do? If you haven't heard of the Bombersky case, or the Ken Rex McElroy case in the town of Skidmore, or the Killdozer case in the town of Granby, we would love for you to suggest other cases that we might do, because there are links to all of these vigilante cases, and we would hope to bring them all to you. Thank you for watching. Join us in the next one.